So now we're going to look at choosing a digital camera. There are so many cameras on the market these days that it's very difficult to know where to begin. But really, choosing a camera is not so much about the camera manufacturer, it's about what your needs are. So you have to decide, first of all, what do I want to use my camera for? If you're going to do a lot of adventure sports and you're going to get the camera wet, then maybe you just want to have a small compact camera that you can take with you and not worry about it. If you've got a great big SLR, then you have a lot more flexibility, but if it's so big and heavy, then you may not even take it with you in the field. So Rachel and Celine have now joined me, and they've both got different needs for their photography. So we're going to look at the different types of camera that we have on the sofa and what the advantages and disadvantages are of these cameras. So Celine, you do a lot of travelling. When you went travelling to Afghanistan, what kind of thing were you looking for in a camera?
Mostly I was looking for a camera that would be very robust so that it can go all sorts of weather conditions. I was also looking at something that was light enough because I had a lot to carry, so I couldn't afford to have a big heavy camera.
Okay.
And most importantly, I still want to have good quality images.
Okay, because you're doing some slideshows now, so that's why you need the really good image quality.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so, and I believe at the end you chose a Nikon SLR, the D90, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Before I went, I was shopping for cameras, and I noticed that some of the small compact camera also have 12 megapixels. And I ended up buying an SLR, but could have just gone with a small compact camera?
That's a good question. You're quite right. Like, a lot of these compact cameras, such as this Panasonic, are 12 megapixels, and even this big DSLR is 12 megapixels. So why buy a big DSLR of 12 megapixels when you can get the same number of pixels in the compact camera? Well, the big difference between these two cameras is the fact that the sensor inside this SLR is significantly bigger than the sensor inside the compact camera. And that, for a number of reasons which I'll talk about later, give you significantly better image quality in the DSLR. It means that you can use much smaller apertures, you get a greater range of flexibility with the lenses, and you can use the camera in much darker situations and increase the ISO. So by choosing the D90 SLR, you ended up with a lot of flexibility and still had the same number of pixels, and I'm sure you found in dark areas you got good quality pictures.
Yes. Now that I'm back in Canada, I'm doing a lot of skiing and backcountry skiing, so I'm looking at buying a smaller camera because I don't want to carry my big SLR. What would you recommend for that purpose?
Essentially, there are some very robust waterproof cameras which are ideal for skiing and snorkeling, that kind of thing. Some of them include a GPS, so if you're out for a few days backcountry skiing, then it'll kind of remind you as to where you took the photographs, and you can put it on a map later on. The thing to remember with these small compact cameras is not to get a lens that does too much. If your zoom starts at the equivalent of, say, 28 millimeters and is an 18 times zoom, then you're asking an awful lot for that lens to do, and the result is that you get lower image quality and the aperture ends up being quite small, and that affects how fast the shutter is going to go. So I'd recommend, if you buy a small compact camera, make sure that the lens is something like a 28 to 150 or even 110 millimeter equivalent. So don't expect the lens to do too much, and that way you'll get great image quality in a nice small package such as this one. Now if you want something slightly bigger, then this is a bigger camera. We've got a significantly bigger lens. So even though this is an 18 times zoom, the fact that the lenses are that much bigger allows the lens to give you a wider aperture depending on where you zoom it. Again, this starts at around 27, 28 millimeters. It looks a lot larger, but it's actually very lightweight and gives you lots of flexibility in the controls. We have both the viewfinder and we can look at things on the LCD. The viewfinder is useful here because in the bright conditions of skiing, sometimes it can be difficult to see the LCD. So that's another option for you. So that's
Oh yeah, and on this one you can use manual mode or aperture priority or program.
Exactly, so the modes that you're used to on your Nikon SLR are the same on this Panasonic, and you don't have those modes on most compacts. Most compacts have less flexibility in what they can do.
Looks great, very light.
Yeah.
Okay, then why would you choose to use this big D3 camera that's heavy and bulky if it's 12 megapixel?
Okay, that's a good question. I use this big D3 because it has a very large sensor, and I do a lot of wildlife photography. So when the conditions are very dark, I can increase the ISO to some really high levels, such as 6400 ISO, and still get low noise pictures in almost dark conditions. The other thing about these large cameras is they're very fast. You can take a lot of frames, say about 9 frames a second, and just keep on taking pictures. And also they're incredibly robust with lots of weather seals, and the batteries are very big, so you can work in very cold conditions when it's dark and take photographs when the speed is happening really quickly. So it is heavy, but it gives me a lot of flexibility. It has lots of controls on the camera, so I can change things whilst I've got the camera at my eye. So that's the reason why I use these bigger SLRs.
And what about the sensor? Is it the same as the other camera?
Now this one's actually what's called a full frame sensor. So this is the same size as 35mm film. So we've got a much bigger sensor in this camera compared to this one. So when you take a photograph at high ISOs, the quality from this camera is much better at high ISO than it is from the smaller camera. But having said that, if I'm out with my kids and take the dog out, I don't take this in my pocket, I put this in my pocket. So that's why I have the two.
So it's a good idea to have two cameras.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like a pair of shoes. There's not going to be one pair of shoes that meets all conditions. Photography is a huge compromise, and trying to get one camera to fit all situations is very difficult. So, you know, having a compact camera to do certain things and a bigger SLR to do, you know, more specialised stuff like your travel is a good option. Yeah, the best camera is the one that you've got with you. So, and photography is all about having fun. If you're not going to have fun by dragging a great big SLR around, then buy a smaller camera.
Richard, I've noticed when I went to look at compact cameras that there was a great range in price, and which I found confusing. So why would I buy a camera that was $400 and had 12 megapixels when I could get one for $100?
That's a good question, Rachel. The camera is in two significant parts, and that is the lens and the sensor. The cheaper cameras have quite a small sensor in them, and that affects the quality. And the lens, which is in front of the sensor, if you have a cheap lens, then the light gets distorted before it actually hits the sensor. So the more expensive compacts have a better quality lens, and they usually have a larger sensor. So those two combined give you much better image quality on the more expensive compacts compared to the image quality on the cheaper ones. So as usual, you get what you pay for. You pay $400 and you'll get a much nicer picture than you will do on a $100 camera.
What about durability of these cameras? It always seems that they're so little and they're light, and they always get dropped. Do you have any recommendations as to a camera that's small but very durable?
In the last couple of years, several camera manufacturers have come up with much more robust compact cameras. Not only are they robust, but most of them are also waterproof, some down to maybe just 1 metre, but other ones will go down to even 12 metres. So now you can buy a compact camera that is waterproof and you can take it snorkeling. And the other advantage of them, so this is one such camera, this is a new Panasonic TS3. So this is waterproof to 12 metres and shockproof to 2 metres. So I know you have a young son and I have a young daughter. This is great for them because if they can be a bit more haphazard with it and drop it, and the camera's going to take the punishment, they can get it wet and get it covered in sand and it's still going to work. So these are a great choice for families who want to have a camera in a variety of different rough environments. The main thing to remember if you do get a camera like this is that all the weather sealing is done with a seal around the battery compartment, so it's very important to keep that area very clean. But the camera, when you get it, actually gives you the instructions to make sure that you the seal's always nice and clean. But yeah, these are a great option nowadays.
So you don't even need a housing then to take that camera underwater?
That's correct. Like a few years ago, Celine and I were in the Galapagos Islands on a workshop, and there most of us had small compact cameras, and we actually had a plastic housing so that we could take them into the water when we went snorkeling. But last year when I went back there, I had a Canon D10 camera, and we could just take the compact cameras straight into the water with no housing or anything. So they've really progressed in terms of durability and protection in the water.
That's fantastic. Richard, I really like that look that professional photographers get, where there's sort of a blurry background in behind a nice family picture, and I'd love to get some images of my son Aidan, and I'm just not really sure how to do that. Have you any suggestions?
Yes, that's actually quite difficult to do with a compact camera like this waterproof one, or even the slightly bigger Lumix. The problem is that when you have a very small sensor, what's known as the depth of field is also very large. So the smaller sensor, the larger the depth of field. Now that blurry background is due to having a very shallow depth of field. So the person in the foreground is in sharp focus, but the background quickly drops out of focus, and hence we have a nice blurry background. To do that, you either need to get your compact camera, get close to the subject and zoom it a lot, or you need to get an SLR which has a much bigger sensor. So professional photographers are using bigger SLR cameras, and that gives them the advantage of, when they use a telephoto lens, they can use a low f number. That gives them a low or shallow depth of field, gives you that nice blurry background. And also, as we saw in the flash section, they can use their flash in more creative ways and bounce it off ceilings and get that nice soft look from the flash, instead of having the harsh look from the flash that you get with these compacts. Because when you fire a flash straight at somebody, it lights them up, but it doesn't do it in a flattering way. So an SLR, like one of these Nikons, gives you the advantage of, we can add the dedicated flash, and we have a much bigger sensor, and we can use a portrait lens that has a very low f number and gives us this really nice soft depth of field.
Great. So Richard, I have a nephew who's a teenager who has a compact camera right now and is fascinated with photography and really wants to get going with it and more involved. So what type of camera might he move to at this stage, would you recommend?
Okay, I'd probably go for two recommendations. One would be the built-in camera, such as this one, where we have a much larger lens than we have in the compact camera. They have the bigger sensor, and also we have the modes that we have on an SLR, so the program mode, aperture priority, shutter priority, and manual mode. So now you can start to learn to use the modes that you would find on an SLR, but we're still using a relatively compact camera, and it has a lot of flexibility to it. So these cameras are excellent. They're really good for people who want to travel and get something lightweight, and maybe don't need the slightly bigger bulk of the SLR and the extra lenses. So this would be one stage I would go to, or I would say go straight on and get a digital SLR. Now there's two interesting things about a basic SLR. The entry-level models give you excellent image quality. They've got a nice large sensor, and you can put on the basic kit lens, which are very lightweight, but for ultimate image quality you want to get a more expensive lens. But for people starting out, the kit lenses are excellent. But the entry-level cameras, though, they rely a lot more on the menu on the back of the camera. They only have the one control dial. So it's a great entry-level way to start, but you'll probably find he's going to upgrade maybe in a couple of years' time. On the slightly more expensive models, then now you have more buttons on the actual camera, and you have two dials, so you can change a lot of the settings whilst the camera's up to your eye. So even though he may not use those features immediately, this is a camera that you can actually grow into for several years. So one of these three cameras is what I would go to, either an SLR or what some people call a prosumer compact camera, which has a lot more features than the basic ones. And unfortunately, one model that we don't have here is, there's a new type of camera which is similar to an SLR, in that you can take the lens off. So the thing about SLR cameras is we can actually take the lens off and change the lens. And these new cameras are called mirrorless cameras. So they have the same ability to change the lens, but they're not the same size as an SLR because there is no mirror anymore. The light goes straight through the lens, like this design. So it makes them small and light like this, but we can actually take the lens off. So that's a new concept as well. But personally, I would say integral lens, large camera like this one, or the basic DSLR.
I know that cost is going to be a factor to him as well. So in sort of the order of the size of the camera, is that the way the cost or the number of features, I would guess, impacts the cost of these cameras? So he'll be looking at that as well. Can you give us at least some sense of the most expensive camera that we're looking at here, and one that might be approachable for a teenager who has a limited budget?
Okay, so the integral camera is probably the cheaper of the three. These are around about the $400 mark as a starting price. So that's a good level. The basic DSLR with a kit lens is probably around the same $400 to $500. But now you have something where by investing in more lenses in the future, you can actually grow with the camera. And then the bigger SLRs are another $200 or $300 on top of this one.
Okay.
But the thing to remember as well is that DSLR technology has been very good for the last good few years. So there's a lot of excellent cameras out there that have either just been phased out and are available new, but they're not the current model, or maybe buy a used camera, and that way you can get a good quality DSLR at a budget price.
Great idea.
Okay.